Thank you for watching. Subscribe on Deceived Husbands for more stories. Lena sat on the bed, smirking up into Frank's face as he stood over her. She yanked his shirt out from his pants, unbuttoned it, and tossed it aside. She started planting soft kisses on his stomach and chest, and Frank closed his eyes, letting out a slight moan. Lena leaned back, still smiling. Frank clutched her shoulders tightly to steady himself, nearly collapsing onto the bed as he tried to catch his breath. Lena took the opportunity to shed her own clothes and join him on the bed, holding onto his hair. She pulled Frank closer and kissed him deeply before demanding, "Enough of this playing around. I need you now." Frank didn't hesitate. He positioned himself and made his move, holding her close for a few moments before collapsing, completely exhausted, onto the bed beside her. They both lay there, gasping for air. A few minutes later, they got up, showered in the guest bathroom, and dressed to head back to work. Before leaving the room, Lena pulled Frank in for one last kiss. "Listen, that was great, but we can't keep doing this," Lena said. "You said that last week too, but you know you can't stay away," Frank replied. "I know, but Rob's been acting strange, and I think he's starting to catch on. Plus, the whole thing with your wife calling you last week has me a bit rattled. As good as this is, I'm not about to ruin my marriage for a little fling." "Yeah, you're right," Frank conceded. "We need to cool it for a while until things settle down. I don't want to lose Emily either." At that point, I had seen enough. I picked up my laptop and smashed it against the nearest wall. This cheating piece of work was going to pay, and as for Frank, if I ever got my hands on him, it would be the end of him. But before I could act on those thoughts, my office door creaked open, and my assistant, Sarah, hesitantly peeked in and asked, "Are you okay, Mr. Jacobs?" Taking a deep breath, I replied, "Yeah, Sarah, I'm fine. Sorry if I startled you. I think I'm going to take off for the day and hit the gym. I need to work through some things, and a hard workout might help. Oh, and Sarah, could you call it and have them order me a new laptop?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Jacobs. I'll take care of that right away." With that, I grabbed my coat and stormed out the door. I guess I should introduce myself. I am Rob Jacobs, and that was my wife of nearly 15 years in that video. We met in college, and after dating for a year, we tied the knot right after graduation. For all these years, I thought we had a solid marriage and 2 wonderful kids. I guess I was wrong. This nightmare started a few days ago when Emily Ross, Frank's wife, came to see me, worried that something was going on between her husband and my wife. If it weren't for her, I'd still be in the dark about what was happening under my own roof. 3 days earlier, Sarah said, "Mr. Jacobs, there's a Mrs. Ross in the lobby to see you. She said her husband Frank works with your wife and that it's urgent." "Thanks, Sarah. Did she mention what it's about?" "No, sir. She just said it's personal. Tell her I'll be there in a few minutes. I had a bad feeling about this. Why would a woman I barely knew from a company Christmas party be coming to see me about something personal? It wasn't even noon and my day was already off to a rough start. Now this, and on a Wednesday no less. Maybe it was time to scrap my nod rinking until 5 rule. I walked into the lobby and saw a pretty brunette sitting on the sofa. "Mrs. Ross, I'm Rob Jacobs. Please come back to my office and we can talk." "Thank you, but please call me Emily," she said, standing to shake my hand. "Okay, well, follow me, Emily, and feel free to call me Rob," I replied, leading her around the corner into my office and shutting the door. "Please have a seat and tell me what's on your mind," I said, motioning to the sofa in the corner of the office. As she crossed the room, I couldn't help but notice how stunning she was. Emily Ross had shoulder-length black hair, and while some might say she was a little curvy, I thought she looked just right. I took a seat in one of the chairs facing the sofa, and noticed her hands were trembling as she tried to gather her thoughts. "Rob, I don't really know how to say this, so I'm just going to come out with it. I believe my husband is having an affair with your wife, and I was hoping you could help me prove it. I don't know if you've suspected anything, but I can show you what I know, and we can go from there if you're okay with that." Wow. Not only was she beautiful, but she was clearly out of her mind. I didn't know her husband well, but I knew Lena, and the last thing she would ever do is cheat on me and our kids. But I figured the only way out of this was to hear her out and try to convince her she was being paranoid. Well, Emily, you'll have to excuse my skepticism, but that's really hard to believe. But show me what you've got, and let's see where it leads us, I told her. She took a few deep breaths to calm herself, then began. Okay, last Saturday, I was running some errands in town and decided to surprise Frank at the office to see if he wanted to grab lunch. But when I got there, he wasn't around. I asked around, and they told me he left for lunch at about 11:30 a.m. I thought that was odd since I had packed him a lunch that morning like I always do, so thinking maybe he was running some errands, I tried to call him to see if he wanted to meet up, but he didn't answer. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes when she paused for a moment. At this point, I just wanted to get her through this story and out of my office before she started bawling. I handed her a box of tissues from the table and asked, "So where does Lena come into this?" She wiped her eyes and nose before continuing. When he still hadn't returned my call by the time I got home, I started to worry because that's not like him. Then I remembered about 6 months ago when our oldest started driving, I downloaded one of those apps that tracks your location by your cell phone on all our phones. I knew it also tracked mine and Frank's phones, so I pulled up the app and found his location. It was an address about 15 minutes from his office in a neighborhood I didn't recognize. When I searched the address online, your name came up, and I remembered you and your wife from the Christmas party. I still wasn't convinced that Lena and Frank were having an affair, but this definitely looked suspicious. I figured I'd have to ask Lena about this later. "So, Emily," I asked, "did you ask him why he was at my house in the middle of the day?" "No, but let me finish. This app also tracks where you've been for the past 90 days, so I pulled up Frank's history and found that he's been going to your house every Thursday for the past 3 weeks. He'd leave his office around 11:30 a.m., get to your house around 11:45, stay there until about 1:00 p.m., and then head back to the office. That's when I knew what was going on. When I asked him that evening why he hadn't called me back, he told me he was with a client. There's only one reason I can think of for him to lie to me like that." I felt the rage boiling up in me as she spoke, but I caught myself before I exploded on her. Emily was just the messenger, and she was clearly hurting enough. It was my turn to take a few deep breaths and compose myself. Then it hit me. The history on my security system could confirm if she was right. So I pulled up the system on my phone app and scrolled back 3 weeks, and there it was. Lena had disarmed the system at 11:45 a.m. and rearmed it at 1:00 p.m. I then scrolled through to find corresponding entries at the same times for the next 2 Thursdays, but nothing suspicious before 3 weeks ago. Emily just sat there quietly, crying while I paced the floor, trying to figure out what to do. Then it hit me. I picked up the phone and called my friend Tom Patterson. "Hey, Tom, I know this is last minute, but could you come over to my office as soon as possible? I've got an urgent situation and I need your help." Tom said he'd be there in about 10 minutes. I explained to Emily that Tom was my security system contractor. I develop residential and commercial properties, and Tom handles the security for all my projects, including my house. My plan was to get photographic proof of whatever was going on before confronting Lena or Frank. Tom arrived as promised, and after I told him the situation, he laid out exactly what we needed to do if we were sure we wanted to see what was going on. "Just make sure this is what you want, Rob. Once you see the pictures, you'll never get those images out of your head." I looked at Emily, and she nodded in agreement. So I told Tom, "Let's do this and let the chips fall where they may." Tom explained that my current security system wouldn't be much help. The cameras inside the house were motion activated, but only when the system was armed, designed to ensure privacy. But he could install some tiny high-def cameras in whichever rooms I chose that would give us crystal-clear video and audio of everything going on in those rooms. I gave him the green light, and he promised to get everything installed the next day after Lena left for work. The plan was to put cameras in the master bedroom, the guest bedroom, and the great room. Tom promised that he could set them up to give us a 360-degree view of those rooms. The cameras would be motion-activated and capable of filtering the light automatically for perfect pictures anytime, day or night. They transmitted a signal to a receiver that Tom installed in my attic, and I could watch them via a phone app. The video would also be saved in the cloud in case I needed it later. Now, all we had to do was keep our cool for a couple of days and see what we found out. It was a lot harder than I imagined, but I kept busy with work and even worked from home in the evenings after dinner to avoid any long conversations with Lena. Emily had it easier since her kids were still at home, so she stayed busy with their activities. With 2 teenage boys, she was constantly running around with them, and as usual, she barely had a moment alone with Frank in the evenings. At my house, it was just me and Lena, so it was tougher. Our kids were off at college. Our daughter Ellie is a senior, and our twin boys, Jack and Ben, are sophomores. They all attend the same college where Lena and I met. I spent most of Tuesday and Wednesday nights alone in my office, trying to figure out how to tell them about all this. Finally, Thursday arrived. That morning, Lena kissed me goodbye as I left, just like she did every other day. To her, this was just another day in the 15 years we've been married. Since Monday, I had been trying to recall any odd changes in her behavior over the past 3 weeks, but there wasn't much to note. The only thing that stood out was that she had been a lot more aggressive in bed on the weekends. Normally, she followed my lead, but lately she'd started taking charge more. I remember really liking it until I found out why. So that brings us to today. After the lovebirds left my house, I downloaded the video to my laptop, emailed a copy to Emily Ross, and sat down to watch it in my office. Now I just had to figure out what to do next, preferably something that wouldn't land me in jail. On my way to the gym, I called Nick Walters, my attorney, and explained everything to him. He said he'd draw up divorce papers, filing on the grounds of adultery. Normally, in our state, it takes about 12 months to finalize a divorce. But there's a loophole for adultery that allows you to finalize it in just 3 months. I wasn't planning to drag this out. I also made one more call to my good friend James Davis, who just happens to be the regional vice president at the bank where both Lena and Frank Ross work. I've used James to finance almost all my projects over the past 15 years, and he owes me a lot of favors. I intended to collect on a few of those favors now. I explained the situation to him and told him I'd send him the evidence, expressing my confidence that he'd handle things appropriately for 2 employees engaged in a sexually inappropriate relationship during work hours. He assured me he'd take care of everything and that I'd be completely satisfied with his actions. 2 hours later, after a long, hard workout and a shower, I couldn't put this off any longer. I had to face Lena at some point. On the way home, I played a playlist from my phone and tried to use some techniques I learned years ago in college while prepping for big football games. These techniques had always helped me clear my mind and focus with laser precision on the task at hand. I pulled into the garage and parked in my usual spot before heading into the house, where I found Lena in the kitchen working on dinner just like every night. "Hi, honey. How was your day?" she asked, smiling at me over her shoulder. "Awful," I grunted, dropping my briefcase and heading to the bar for a drink. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Anything I can do to help?" she asked. "As a matter of fact, there is," I replied. "Take a break and come into the den with me for a second. I need you to look at something." She came in and slid beside me on the sofa, rubbing my thigh with her hand. "Okay, baby, what exactly is it you want to show me?" I took out my phone, pulled up the video app, cranked the volume up, and hit play before handing her the phone. She watched the black screen for a second before a look of horror crossed her face as she saw herself and Frank. "Oh," she mumbled. Then panic set in as the scene unfolded on my phone. "No, baby, oh no," she cried, dropping my phone on the floor. "Baby, I can explain. It's not what you think," she pleaded. That was it. At that moment, all my patience and self-control vanished, replaced with all the hurt I'd been bottling up over the past week, and I just exploded. "What the hell is it you think you need to explain? You don't have to explain a damn thing to me." The video was clear. It's obvious Im married to a lying, cheating tramp who cares more about herself and some pencil pusher than she does about the man who's loved her for 17 years or her kids. Is there anything else you want to explain? When I finally calmed down, I noticed she was sobbing into her hands. "Please, Rob, I know I messed up big time. but please don't call me those horrible names. I'm so sorry. Can I make it up to you somehow? That did it. Call you names? I'm not calling you names, I'm stating facts. Lying? Yep, that's what you've been doing since you started your fling with that jerk. Cheating? Yep, the video proves that. Tramp? Once again, refer to the video. So, dear, please explain how I'm calling you names. As far as being sorry, the only thing you're sorry about is getting caught. You sure as hell didn't look sorry while you were getting it on with that jerk. My face was flushed, and I could feel my heart racing in my chest. I closed my eyes and took some deep breaths to calm down before I had a heart attack. When I opened my eyes, Lena was curled up in a fetal position, sobbing. Okay, Rob, I whispered to myself, get it together. Just explain her options and get the hell out of here. Listen, Lena, I just want you to be clear on your options at this point. Nick is drawing up divorce papers as we speak. You'll be served next week and you'll need to take them to a lawyer to review. I think I'm being fair in what I'm offering. Half the equity in the house, half the retirement accounts, and $4,000 a month for 12 months. You got 2 weeks to sign them and avoid going to court, where I'll be forced to play that video for the whole world to see, including your parents and our kids. It's your choice. Now I'm going to leave, so don't call me, don't text me, don't email me. In fact, if you see me around town, turn and go the other way because I don't even want to see your face. Is that clear? With that, I got up, went upstairs, packed some clothes, and headed to my car. I'll send someone to get the rest of my things. You can stay here until the divorce is final. I can't stand the thought of being in this house after what you've done to it. I paused for a moment, looking back at my home of 12 years, and then slammed the door, leaving her sobbing on the sofa. When I left my house, I drove straight to the apartment that my secretary, Sarah, had arranged over the past few years. Every time my company developed an apartment complex, I made sure to include 4 to 5 furnished apartments in each development to rent as short-term executive apartments. Our area has a lot of foreign companies, and many of them have managers from their home offices come to town for several months at a time. These units have been really popular with these companies and usually rent for about 4 times the normal lease rate of the other units in the complex. Who would have thought I'd end up living in one of these units? I opened the door, dropped my bags in the entryway, and collapsed into one of the chairs in the living area, suddenly feeling completely drained. Just then, my phone buzzed. Who the hell keeps calling? I pulled the phone out of my pocket and saw 12 missed calls from Lena, 2 from Ellie, and 1 each from Jack and Ben. What part of "don't call me" does this woman not understand? I quickly deleted all of Lena's calls before hitting the button to call my daughter back. "Daddy, are you okay?" she answered. "Baby, I'm fine." "What's going on?" I replied. "Well, Mom called about an hour ago looking for you. She sounded really upset, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said you guys had some kind of fight, that you stormed out of the house and won't answer her calls. She said she's tried calling, but you won't answer. That doesn't sound like you, so I got scared that something might have happened to you," Ellie said. Well, that didn't take long. That's probably why the boys are calling too, I thought. Ellie, I can assure you that nothing's happened to me. What your mother failed to tell you is that we were fighting because she decided I wasn't good enough for her. So she found herself another man and started sneaking him into the house at lunch. So it wasn't exactly a fight. It was more like I'm divorcing her, and I never want to see her again. Now she thinks she can explain it all away if I'll just listen to her. But it'll be a cold day in hell before I listen to any more of her lies. I suddenly realized I was yelling at my daughter, so I paused to catch my breath. It was then that I heard her crying on the other end. Well, I obviously didn't handle that very well, did I? I told myself. I managed to get my emotions in check and went on to explain everything to Ellie. I made sure to let her know that I didn't want this to come between her and her mother. This was between Lena and me. I wanted her to understand that this didn't affect her relationship with either of us. After I hung up with Ellie, I called Jack and Ben and let each of them know what was going on as well. Unfortunately for Lena, they both inherited my temper, and they were both really pissed at their mother when we hung up. They'll eventually make peace with her, but she's going to get an earful from them before things settle down. The next few weeks passed by fairly quietly. I buried myself in work and the gym and tried to stay too busy to think about the storm my life had become. My only social contacts outside of work were my kids and Emily Ross. I talked to the kids several times a week. The boys kept the conversations to school and sports. Ellie would catch me up on what was happening with her, but she'd also try to bring up Lena, who, according to her, was not doing well at all. Emily Ross and I met for lunch every Monday. It probably wasn't the best move given our circumstances, but we both needed someone to talk to, and no one else really understood what we were going through. I was moving full speed ahead to divorce Lena, but Emily was having second thoughts. It was different for her. She still had kids at home, and a divorce would be much messier for her and Frank. She would often use me as a sounding board about the decision she was facing. On the last day before her deadline, Nick informed me that Lena had finally signed the papers and returned them to his office. Now it was just a matter of waiting 3 months for a court date to finalize the agreement. The only request Lena made was to talk to me before we go to court. Despite my objections, Nick made it clear that things would go much smoother in court if I met with her. He said most judges wouldn't look favorably on a spouse ending a 15-year marriage without any counseling or at least some honest discussions between the two parties. I finally agreed to meet with her, but it would be when I was ready. Over the next month, I reverted back to the way I was before I met Lena. I worked hard, worked out like a madman, and played hard. My business required me to be out of town a couple of nights each week, and most of those nights included dinner and drinks, usually at a bar after work. I'm a creature of habit, so this was a pattern he'd followed for years. But normally, he'd eat, have a couple of drinks, chat with whoever was sitting near me at the bar, then head to my room to call Lena and the kids. There would sometimes be some harmless flirting with some of the women at the bar, but it never went beyond that. I'm not proud to admit it, but since Lena blew up our marriage by cheating on me, I was drinking more than I should when I was on the road. The harmless flirting got out of hand and wasn't so harmless anymore. I ended up hooking up with a few of the women I met while traveling. Some were single and some were married, but I didn't really care. Their marriages weren't my problem. I was furious with Lena for what she did, and I hated Frank for involving himself in my marriage, but now I had allowed myself to do the same thing to other men's marriages. I was searching for anything to make the pain go away, but nothing seemed to work. During this time, Emily Ross and I continued to meet for lunch each week. We even went out on a few dates in the evenings. We didn't call them dates, but we were both lonely. And sometimes you just need to spend time with a friendly face. It was certainly more satisfying to me than the one-night stands. There was no sexual relationship, but I had kissed her goodnight a few times, lingering a little longer than I probably should have on more than one occasion. Emily and I were out for dinner one Monday night, and I noticed she was quieter than usual and just playing with her food. There was obviously something on her mind. She finally stopped and looked me in the eye. "Rob, as you know, we've been out a few times lately, and whether we call it what it is or not, they've basically been dates. And I know it's been a little awkward the last few times when we said goodbye. It was like we both wanted more than just a kiss, but we were afraid to let things go any further. So I wanted you to know that I think I really need for things to, how do I put this, move a little further along, at least physically. So I'm just going to come out and ask you something. I'll understand if you say no, but if I don't ask you now, I'll lose my nerve." The way she was acting made me a little nervous, but finally I said, "Go ahead. You know you can ask me anything." "Okay, here goes. As you know, Frank and I were high school sweethearts, and before all of this, we'd only been with each other when it came to intimacy." At that point, she paused to collect her thoughts. "I'm not really sure if I can give him a second chance or not. Some days I want to try, and some days I just want a fresh start. But I'm still a woman, and I still have certain needs, if you know what I mean. And I think you probably have some of those same needs." I just nodded to let her know I understood as she paused to collect her thoughts. "So what I wanted to ask you is if you'd be willing to help me take care of those needs. I know that sounds crazy, but there's no way I could ever just pick up a stranger and go to bed with him. But you're my friend, and I trust you. Don't worry about hurting my feelings if you say no. I'll understand, but I really think this is something I need, and maybe it would be good for you too. For once in my life, I was speechless. That was the last question I ever expected to be asked. I carefully thought about how to respond before speaking. Emily, wow, I'm flattered that you'd feel comfortable enough to ask me to help you with this. Please don't take my hesitation as a lack of interest. I think you're absolutely stunning, and I've been attracted to you since you first walked into my office. My first instinct is to scream yes at the top of my lungs, but I really need some time to think through all the implications before I give you a final answer. How about I call you in the morning with my decision? Sure, I understand. I know this is a huge favor I'm asking, and I can certainly understand if you decide not to do it. I just didn't know who else to turn to. After that, we finished our meal and talked a little more before it was time to go. I promised to call her first thing in the morning with my answer. On some level, I already knew I was going to say yes as soon as she asked. Hell, I'd been imagining what it would be like to be with her for weeks now. I just needed to convince myself that I could do this and then walk away from her. I knew that if she decided to commit to her marriage afterward, I couldn't see her anymore, not even for lunch. It came to me on my way home that evening that maybe this could help us both move on. So I called her. "Hello," she answered. "Hey, Emily, it's Rob. I've thought about what you asked, and my answer is yes, on one condition." There was silence for a second on the other end before she tentatively asked, "So what's the condition?" "Well, if we just met at my apartment or at your house and slept together, it would feel like a one-night stand. I need something more from you to feel comfortable doing this. So the condition is this: I think a change of scenery would do us both some good. If you agree to go away with me this weekend, I'll agree to be with you at some point over that time. We could leave on Friday and come back late Monday." "Wow, count me in," she replied. "I was so sure you were going to say no. I'll just tell Frank I need to get away to clear my head, and he needs to watch the boys for a few days. What time do you want to leave? I'll text you with the plans tomorrow, and Emily, I'm really looking forward to this. Bye." As soon as Sarah got to work the next day, I had her make all the reservations for the weekend. Then I texted Emily and told her to meet me at the airport at noon on Friday. Despite all her questions, I insisted that everything was a surprise, and she'd have to wait until Friday to find out the details. After an agonizingly slow week, I was standing in front of the terminal when I saw her walking towards me in a pair of tight, faded jeans, boots, and a form-fitting sweater that showed off her curves. "You look amazing." "By the time we board, I'll be the envy of every man in this airport," I said. She leaned in to give me a hug and whispered in my ear, "If you keep talking like that, you won't make it to that plane, mister." "So what's the big surprise?" "Where exactly are you taking me, Mr. Jacobs?" I just smiled as I handed her the ticket. "Chicago, you've got to be kidding me. I've always wanted to go there." "Well, Mrs. Ross, you'll be pleased to know that we have reservations at some very fine restaurants for the next 3 nights and tickets to see Hamilton tomorrow night." I grabbed her bag and headed to check-in with a very happy lady by my side. After a smooth flight, we landed at O'Hare and took a cab to our hotel. It was one of my favorites, located downtown with a great view of the city. It was just after 5:00 p.m. when we checked in. We quickly unpacked and freshened up for dinner. Our reservations were for 7:00 p.m., and the restaurant was only a short walk from the hotel, so we had plenty of time. Emily stood by the window, gazing out at the city while I tied my tie. When I walked up beside her, she turned and wrapped her arms around me. "Well, Mr. Jacobs, I asked for one small favor, and you've gone above and beyond anything I could ever imagine. This is absolutely amazing. I could be wrong, but I'm thinking all this might have just earned you the girlfriend experience this weekend." "That's what I was hoping for, Mrs. Ross," I replied as I pulled her closer and kissed her gently. After a few seconds, I pulled away. "We better stop this now and head to dinner, or we'll never make it because I am getting really close to just throwing you on that bed." We made the short walk to the restaurant hand in hand, taking in the sights and sounds of the city. The dinner was amazing, just as I remembered it from the last time I was here, and after dessert and way too much wine, we headed back to the hotel. When we got back to the room, I could tell she was getting nervous, so I took both her hands in mine and looked directly into her eyes. I want you to know that we won't do anything you're not comfortable with. If all you want to do is act like tourists and enjoy the city, that's fine with me. If you want to go through with your original request, that's fine too. I just want you to relax and enjoy the weekend. No pressure, okay? I led her over to the window, moving behind her and wrapping my arms around her waist. Look out at this beautiful city. This weekend is all about you. I want you to experience things you never have before. Just try to relax and let me take care of everything. I want you to experience the food, the sights, the attractions, and the arts. Let's just enjoy the city. And if you want to explore some casual time between friends, I'll be more than happy to make that happen. I could see the tears forming in the corners of her eyes. No, Rob, I really want to go through with this, and I need it more than you'll ever know. I'm just really nervous. I've only been with one man, and after all that's happened, I just feel so inadequate because I obviously wasn't able to keep him satisfied. Listen, Emily, I think we're both in the same place. We both feel inadequate in some ways, but what they did isn't about us. No matter what was lacking in our marriages, they didn't have the right to go outside the marriage looking for answers. They should have addressed those with us. If anyone is inadequate, it's them. Now, enough about them. Let's just enjoy being here and being with each other for the next few days. With that, I gently kissed the back of her neck, just behind her right ear. Emily closed her eyes and leaned back into me, tilting her head, inviting me to continue. As I kissed Emily's neck, I could feel her shiver slightly, her body relaxing against mine. I didn't push further, giving her the space to take the lead if she wanted. She turned around slowly, her eyes meeting mine with a mix of desire and uncertainty. I cupped her face gently, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and kissed her softly, letting her set the pace. She responded, pressing her body closer to mine, her hands sliding up my chest as she deepened the kiss. After a moment, she pulled back, her breath coming in soft gasps. "I'm ready," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I nodded, taking her hand and leading her toward the bed. We didn't rush things. This wasn't about rushing or mindless passion. It was about connection, about both of us finding something we'd lost. I helped her out of her clothes, making sure to keep the mood light, playful even, as I made her laugh a few times to ease the tension. Once we were both ready, I pulled her close, holding her against me, just savoring the warmth and comfort of being close to someone who understood what I was going through. We spent the rest of the night exploring each other in a way that was more about comfort and understanding than anything else. The intimacy wasn't rushed or forced. It was something we both needed to feel whole again, even if just for a moment. When we finally lay back, exhausted but satisfied, she curled up against me, her head resting on my chest. "Thank you, Rob," she murmured, her voice heavy with sleep. "Any time, Emily," I replied, my own eyes closing as the exhaustion of the day caught up with me. We both drifted off into a deep sleep, the kind you only get when your mind is at peace, even if just for a little while. The next morning, we woke up to the sunlight streaming through the window, the sounds of the city bustling outside. Emily stirred beside me, her eyes fluttering open. She looked up at me with a sleepy smile, and for a moment, everything felt right in the world. But reality quickly set in as we both remembered why we were there, and the weight of our lives outside that hotel room came crashing back down. "I guess we should get ready to head out," she said softly, sitting up and stretching. "Yeah, we've got a full day ahead," I replied, though I couldn't help but feel a pang of regret that our time together was coming to an end. We spent the day exploring Chicago, visiting all the tourist spots, the Art Institute, Millennium Park, and even a boat tour on the river. We laughed, shared stories, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were just two friends on a fun weekend trip without all the baggage of our lives weighing us down. That evening, we had dinner at another fantastic restaurant, followed by the Broadway show I had planned. When we got back to the hotel, there was a heaviness in the air, a sense that this was it, the end of our little escape. Emily looked at me, Her eyes filled with unspoken words, but instead of talking, she just stepped forward and hugged me tightly. I held her close, feeling the same sense of finality. "I'm glad we did this," she whispered against my chest. "Me too," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. We didn't need to say anything more. We both knew that once we left that room, we'd have to go back to our complicated lives, and this weekend would become nothing more than a memory. The next morning, we packed our things in silence, checked out of the hotel, and took a cab to the airport. The flight home was quiet, with both of us lost in our thoughts, trying to figure out what came next. When we landed, we said our goodbyes in the terminal. Emily gave me a small, sad smile before turning to leave, and I watched her walk away, knowing this was likely the last time I'd see her. We had both gotten what we needed from this weekend, but it was time to move on. I got into my car and drove straight to the hospital to check on Jack. This was going to be tough seeing Lena again, facing the reality of our broken marriage, but I knew what needed to be done. When I arrived at the hospital, I found Jack's room and took a deep breath before walking in. As soon as I entered, Ellie rushed over and hugged me tightly. "Dad, I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice trembling. "Hey, sweetie," I replied, holding her close. "How's Jack doing?" "He's okay." "The surgery went well, but he's still in a lot of pain." I nodded, looking over at my son, who was lying in the hospital bed, pale and groggy from the pain meds. Lena was sitting beside him, looking just as exhausted as he was. When our eyes met, I could see the regret and guilt written all over her face, but I wasn't here for her. I was here for my son. I walked over to Jack's bed and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. "Hey, buddy. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," he muttered, managing a weak smile. "Well, you're tough, Jack." "You'll be back on your feet in no time," I said, trying to sound confident even though my heart was breaking for him. For the next hour, I stayed by Jack's side, talking with him and Ellie, trying to be the strong, supportive father they needed. Lena didn't say much, and I was grateful for that. The last thing I wanted was to have a confrontation in front of our kids. Eventually, visiting hours ended, and I knew it was time to go. I told Jack I'd be back the next day to check on him, kissed Ellie on the forehead, and nodded to Lena before walking out of the room. As I walked down the hallway, I felt a strange sense of relief. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready to face it head-on. Lena and I had one final conversation to have before I could close this chapter of my life for good. The next morning, I showed up at the house at 8:00 a.m., just like we had agreed. Lena had made breakfast, and after we ate, we sat down on the patio to talk. She started by apologizing again, but I wasn't interested in hearing her excuses. I let her talk, but my mind was already made up. When she finished, I simply told her the truth. I couldn't forgive her for what she'd done, and I didn't want to be with her anymore. She cried, begged, and pleaded, but I stood my ground. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into staying in a marriage that was already dead. After that conversation, I felt a sense of closure. The divorce went through smoothly, and I moved on with my life. I focused on my work, my kids, and rebuilding my life from the ground up. As for Emily, we kept in touch for a while, but eventually we drifted apart. She needed to figure out her own life, and I needed to do the same. We had shared something special, but it was time to let it go. Looking back, I don't regret what happened. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was the life I had been given, and I did the best I could with it. I came out stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to never let anyone take advantage of me again. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey. Life doesn't always go as planned, but sometimes the unexpected twists and turns can lead you to something even better. Thanks for tuning in to this intense story of betrayal and redemption. What would you do if you found yourself in Rob's shoes? Could you walk away and start fresh, or would you seek revenge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories like this one.